Priority number one for Agawam Detective Sergeant Wayne Macy and investigators is finding the killer of Lisa Ziegert.
There was a lot of mystery and confusion surrounding this case right from the very beginning.
Police believe there are people out there who know something about Lisa's murder and who have not yet come forward.
What? What are you talking about?
People start to wonder, if I walk out the door of my house, is somebody going to be out there waiting for me? That's the unknown, and the unknown creates all kinds of conflict in your mind.
There are very, very dangerous people who are intentionally hiding their behavior from everyone they know. Those people are wolves. They remain in the shadows. They kill because they like it. There's no one more dangerous than that. I spent my career closing murder cases. But I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective. Agawam, Massachusetts, a small town of about 25,000 souls. Sophia Maynard pulls up to Brittany's card shop at 9 o'clock in the morning to open business for the day. She notices Lisa Ziegert's car in the parking lot and thought that was very odd. Lisa's responsible to close the business at 9 o'clock in the evening, lock up, and go home. So why is she here now? Sophia goes to the front door and it's unlocked. The lights are on, the music is playing. It's not supposed to be. So she proceeds to search for her and becomes extremely alarmed when she sees the back door is standing open. It should be closed and locked. This is bad, and she instinctively feels it. And her instincts are correct. It is bad.
I am Wayne Macy. I was with the Agawam Police Department for 31 years. On the morning of the 16th, I was advised that there was a missing person down at Brittany's card shop. Agawam is a very small town, a close-knit community. It was just unlikely that this kind of a thing could have happened. When I first drove up, the only thing when I got there in the parking lot was the vehicles that our police officers had arrived in. And the one car that didn't fit in there was Lisa's car, all by itself in the corner. Walking into the store, there was no signs of a struggle as far as things falling on the floor. Nothing was knocked over. But as we kept investigating inside the store, I started noticing things that were completely and totally out of place. They had her pocketbook and her coat remaining in the building. Something is happening here.
The register is undisturbed. This is not a robbery. It's something else.
At that point, I went past the register, and as I was walking through the store, I noticed that there was some blood spattering on some of the cards.
Blood spatter is significant evidence. A first blow produces blood. Subsequent blows disperse the blood. Someone is hurt, not mildly hurt. Hurt. Macy looks in the storage room and finds evidence of a struggle.
I noticed that there's a heel mark in the door from the inside that appears that somebody might have kicked that door.
There are certain earmarks of a crime scene that add up very quickly in a policeman's head. She's assaulted with violence. There is resistance. No one's looking for money. She is the motive.
This was an obvious abduction.
We don't have Lisa Ziegert because somebody else has her. Meanwhile, Lisa Ziegert's family arrives.
Lisa's oldest sister, Lynn, and I went to the gift shop, and the police were there. And I went from Lisa's going to turn up to abject fear. This is one of your beloved children who is missing, and you know it's not like her. It made no sense. We were very lucky. We were blessed with 4 children. Lisa was the second oldest, the shortest.
Want to say something?
Lisa always reminded me of an old song. It was called 5'2", Eyes of Blue. But oh, what those 5 foot could do. That was Lisa. Her stature didn't seem to matter. Her personality was big.
Lisa was always a glass half full kind of girl. She was always very positive, always supportive, and a really good listener.
We're here to see if you're having enough fun.
Lisa was the coolest person I've ever known. She did nerdy things, played in the band, was a drum major, read science fiction, but she was just so magnetic of a personality that people didn't care that they might not have exactly the same interests.
So in 1992, she was working at the gift shop part-time, but she was also working full-time as a teaching assistant at the middle school.
Lisa was born to be a teacher.
She was generally empathetic and was somebody easily approachable, and she genuinely cared.
She was 24. She was sweet and loving, and she had her whole life ahead of her.
Someone made this happen. Macy needs to develop a suspect.
At that point in time, some of her friends started gathering outside the store.
This is a small town. Everybody knows that Lisa Ziegert is missing from the card shop.
Lisa's boyfriend, Blair, he was there also.
Boyfriends are always of interest to a detective because they are emotionally involved. And emotion leads to violence in many cases.
Well, when we started talking with Blair, we just wanted to know if there were any problems in the relationship.
He's concerned about this woman. They are in love, and it seems to be genuine. But a good detective takes nothing at face value.
He did have an alibi for that evening. He was with his mother. I mean, he just was nowhere near there that night.
Blair is eliminated by alibi.
He was obviously very worried, but he had no real information as far as what could have happened here.
So here we are. We know she's been hurt in the process of being abducted. And other than that, we don't know anything. Where is she?
Agawam PD quickly called for assistance from the state police and the FBI. Combined with participation from the community, the search to find Lisa was extensive.
As the days start going by, I'm losing hope because of the fact that we haven't found her.
I thought something bad may have happened to her, but I never thought she wouldn't come home. Everything will be fine.
On April the 19th, A man is walking his dog in a remote area about 3 miles from the card shop, and the dog strains at the lead and drags the owner forward because he sees and smells something.
And he got to within 50 or 75 feet of what he determined might be a female body. I am thinking, this is it. This is going to be more than a coincidence.
Good policemen don't believe in coincidences. 4 days after Lisa Ziegert's disappearance, her body has been found.
The 24-year-old Agawam woman was abducted from the card shop where she worked. Days later, her body was found in a wooded area off Route 75.
In 1992, this barricade wasn't here. It was pretty much open. I'm going to say that the body is about 250 to 300 yards down this particular road. I think it was the worst of my career, what I saw.
The first obvious fact of the discovery of her remains is that she is naked from the waist down.
Her clothes were torn or ripped off of her body. And there was blood all over her blouse.
And the buttons from her blouse were found scattered around the area.
Because of Lisa's clothing and the way it was displayed, it was becoming obvious to all of us that it was a sexual assault.
Lisa's injuries indicated that this was a brutal attack. She had been stabbed multiple times to the front of her neck, the back of her neck, and one to her leg as well. She also had multiple defensive injuries on both of her hands.
I was thinking to myself, whoever did this, it's probably not their first time, it's probably not going to be their last time, and they enjoyed it. And that's a very, very dark and disturbing thought.
Lisa had been exposed to Mother Nature for 3 days. So evidence has been destroyed by the weather conditions, but it's also provided something else.
Part of the evidence that was found were tire tracks.
The lab people take castings of the tire tracks for possible identification at a later time if a car is recovered. So that's all you've got.
After viewing the crime scene, I jumped in my cruiser and headed down to where the Ziegerts lived. As I'm walking up, I'm thinking to myself, how do you say the word dead and make it have less of an impact than it's going to have?
Detective Wayne Macy came to the door. I just looked at him. I knew.
She just looked at me and she said,
"She's dead, isn't she?" I kind of dropped to my knees. I said, "What are we going to do without her? She's such a good person. Why is she gone?"
We sat on the porch. Dee's brought Lisa's teddy bear out, and we just talked about the family.
Wayne had an attitude, the way of talking, that you just knew that he cared. Wayne Macy was more than just a detective. He became a friend.
It became more of a personal issue at that point. There was only one case. Nothing was going to be as important as solving Lisa's murder.
The mission is what means everything.
During the autopsy, the most important piece of evidence that we got was the suspect's DNA.
DNA databases did not exist in the same way in 1992. There was no way to compare that person's profile to a large pool of subjects to rule somebody in or out.
But we were always hoping that that was going to be our ace in the hole.
This crime scared the local community in a way that few crimes do.
While police have not yet solved this case, they remain hopeful that someone will come forward to break the case.
It changed the way people lived their lives.
We didn't know who it could have been, but we did strongly feel like it was somebody local. Once it was dark, most women stayed in. A lot of women started to carry mace, and some even got gun licenses.
People were widely concerned that whoever did this assault was going to do it again.
When there's no enemies that are known, Macy turns to friends and family, and Lisa's friend Kim has an interesting story to tell.
The week before she went missing, I had stopped by the shop, and while we were talking, there was a man in the store. He was at the back of the shop, kind of just lingering. I mean, it just didn't seem normal. He finally did leave, and he didn't buy anything. He was a tall and thin man with dark hair, and he was wearing a black jacket.
I can talk about 1,000, tall, lean, white guys who look suspicious, but with Ken, that's what she noticed.
Later, we were standing in front of the big glass window, and she started to look around, and she said, "I just feel like I'm being watched." And I remember looking out across the parking lot and saying to her, "Nobody's out there." In retrospect, I think that she was right and I was wrong. I feel a lot of guilt over it. I do. I carry that with me.
So it's possible that Lisa may have a stalker. Without any solid leads to go on, police turn to the public for their assistance.
Volumes of calls that the Agawam Police Department received with people trying to help. It was so massive that we actually had to put extra phone lines into the Detective Bureau.
As strange as it may sound, a lot of these were coming in from either girlfriends or wives who, for one reason or another, were trying to unload their boyfriends or whoever in our laps.
It's their ex-husband who's a no-good rat. It is insane what people will say, but you are now required, because you asked the question, to pay attention to the answer.
Every lead has to be looked into, or else you're just not doing your job.
But there's one rumor that Macy keeps hearing over and over about a secret love triangle involving Lisa.
This kind of information was coming in from a lot of people.
When you mention a love triangle, every detective would turn a head. 3 is not an even number. Somebody decides to make it 2.
Priority number 1 for Agawam Detective Sergeant Wayne Macy and investigators is finding the killer of Lisa Ziegert. The case is worked on daily. There are phone calls coming in with new information.
I'm very optimistic with both the evidence that we have and information that we've received by telephone.
Rumors are now circulating in this small town about a love triangle gone bad.
The phone calls would be coming in, and some names were given to you once, some names were given to you twice. Ed Brigatti's name was coming to us a lot.
Dad, meme.
Eddie Brigatti's father owned a restaurant 2 or 3 doors down from Brittany's card shop. Eddie Brigatti was also the roommate of Lisa's boyfriend, and there was a circle of friends that were always together.
The prevailing theory was that Lisa's boyfriend and his best friend Eddie were more than just friends. They were in a secret romantic relationship. And when Lisa found out, Eddie decided to get rid of her.
When you are getting information from multiple sources on one particular person, it had to be looked into.
Macy brings Eddie Borgatti in for questioning.
When I talked to the police, I wasn't afraid of any of the questions because I knew that I had nothing to hide.
He was very calm and he was direct.
Borgatti denies it all and says that's insane. And there was no love triangle.
The night Lisa was taken, I was working at my family restaurant, and I have witnesses. I mean, it was family, friends, staff.
He volunteered to give his DNA, and he was cleared through his DNA.
It is not Eddie Borgatti. He is innocent of this crime.
And that should have been the end of the story. But people were reading this like a novel, and they had the answer before they got to the end of the book.
Truth doesn't matter in small towns. Only finger-pointing does.
It just was like a perfect storm of having the house together and then having the shopping center right around the corner. So they came at me. It was tough, but you got to rise above it. I just stayed above it. The priority was always trying to find justice for Lisa, and that's what the family and all the friends always worked towards.
Detective Macy's suspect disappears into thin air. So he returns to the physical evidence from the crime scene. The tire tracks are submitted to the state police laboratory.
It turned out to be a Cooper tire. At the time, back in 1992, they weren't as popular or well-known. We started canvassing area stores that sold Cooper tires, and you're able to come up with a list of people who might have bought them, and you go from there.
They come up with this guy who is from that town. His name is Jason Ramsey.
When we went out to the house and questioned him,
they say, you know, we're looking into this murder case. We found tire tracks. And the guy says, oh, yeah, we were out there recently.
They had been four-wheeling. There was mud all over the place. And they got stuck, and they had to get pulled out. And he took pictures of it. And here are the pictures. At that point in time, DNA taken, end of the story.
So it's another dead end.
We had tried so many things in investigating this case.
Macy even went to the Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico, Virginia, and discussed his case with them.
And we spent 2 days profiling this case. And we had information on some of the characteristics that this particular suspect could possess. But they don't completely narrow it down enough.
I feel like there was a shadow cast over the town, and that over the years, people still didn't feel safe.
People want closure, and they're not getting it.
I never knew Lisa, but as close as I could come was to go every once in a while to her grave to let her know that we were still working and we weren't going to give up on it, and that's what I did.
None of us gave up ever on the idea that Lisa's case would be solved. If somebody said, oh, this is going on, will you do an interview? Yes. Not because I wanted my face there. I wanted Lisa's face there.
As long as people are still talking about Lisa, she will never be forgotten.
We get out of the 90s and now we're into the 2000s. And I was just kind of running on empty. There was nothing left. The most important case of my entire career was Lisa Ziegert. and I didn't finish it. So
sometimes it's just not there. It's just not there.
in a way, I hated to leave, but at the same time, I also felt that we needed new blood. It's time to pass the torch.
So when Wayne leaves in 2001, I get promoted to sergeant. The lieutenant in charge of the detective bureau said, "This is your case. You will be working this case." So I took it as a challenge. I want to solve this. Like, this has to be solved.
FAO has made a decision. We are going to solve this case because we must.
When I took over in 2001, I was excited to take a case that I felt, as did others, that was very solvable. This was a massive case file. So when I took it over, you know, I was determined to get a grasp on it. So right now we're in the evidence room where we have all our files. Through the years, there was a constant investigation. It never stopped. All these files right here, going like this across, these are all people that we label people of interest. We have approximately 400 names, and we felt the answer was in that filing cabinet, and it's a process of elimination. And the only way we can eliminate somebody is to get their DNA. By 2001, there's been a huge advancement, you know, how DNA is obtained and everything like that. You swab their cheek, and off you go, and you move on to the next one. We have to go out and start obtaining DNA samples.
FAO goes through the file of tips involving ex-wives reporting their ex-husbands as being responsible for the crime. He comes across one involving a man named Gary Shara from 1993.
Gary Shara was, just like many other people of interest, an ex-wife called.
On the night that Lisa was abducted, apparently Gary's ex-wife had said that Gary came home very late that night, and he had really no excuse or no reason for why he was late, and that he was always looking at news reports of Lisa Ziegert.
The ex-wife also says he likes to wear a Batman costume while having sex. Okay, Gary, what is this? And who the hell are you?
In 1993, we started investigating Gary's background, and we found out that he had gone to court for a custody battle. Gary's ex-wife apparently had problems with alcohol and a number of other issues.
So the investigators felt that this was just another disgruntled, soon-to-be ex-wife who was trying to get custody of her child and was trying to make her soon-to-be ex-husband look bad.
And then I received a note from his attorney. She said to me, "Gary won't be coming in to see you for an interview because of the custody battle." So as a result of all of that, we ended up putting Gary Shara on the back burner.
So now FAO wants to permanently knock Mr. Shara off the suspect list.
I ended up calling him up. He did come in, very polite, was cordial, but almost the same time that he was walking through the front door, I had a family emergency and I had to leave. So 2 other investigators sat with him.
We wanted to talk to you today a little bit about the upset Lisa Ziegert from April of 1992. Did you know Lisa at all? I don't know her enough. That's my knowledge.
He just completely removes himself from the Ziegert story.
Did you have any kind of newspaper articles or anything about Lisa's murder? We don't really read newspapers even today. I just scan the headlines and maybe sports papers.
They even ask him about frequently wearing a Batman costume.
It's not ringing a bell. I probably wore it for Halloween.
Gary has no idea why he's ever been linked to this case. So they say, fine, there is a way to eliminate you, but we'd like for you to offer us a DNA sample. And he says the most bizarre thing that FAO's ever heard.
And he's like, I'm afraid of cloning. And I'm like, cloning?
Excuse me?
And if you review that tape, he never, ever put his hands on the table. He kept his hands on his lap.
He didn't take a sip of a water bottle that was provided to him. That means to me that he was conscious to not leave DNA on anything.
So he declines. He won't submit to a DNA sample.
He said no, but there's a few other people back then that had said no too. And it's their constitutional right. So we didn't put him in a closeout file, we just put him back in the file and said, we gotta get back to this massive list. And then we pick up the next file, read that, track that individual down, obtain their DNA, and you move on to the next one. So that's how the investigation was led, you know, for several years, actually.
After chasing down DNA for years without a result, a new district attorney comes to town, and he has an idea.
When I came in office in 2015, I was determined to solve Lisa's case. And I mean, we really looked at the lay of the land forensically and said, you know, what can we do to apply new forensic technologies to a case that was at that point 25 or more years old? And one thing that stood out was DNA phenotyping.
What that does is tell us, with a high degree of statistical accuracy, the physical characteristics of the person who left behind that DNA.
And that resulted in literally a composite sketch of the suspect.
Today, I am releasing the snapshot composite sketches as developed by Parabon to the public. This forensic testing has predicted that Lisa's assailant has fair to very fair complexion with some freckling, hazel or brown eyes, and brown or black hair.
We're able to rule out people who have dark skin. We can rule out people with blue eyes. We ruled out people with blonde hair.
We really focused on cross-referencing the results of the phenotyping and who had refused to voluntarily give their DNA profiles.
Eventually, we're able to narrow that list of refusals down to about 11 people.
And they're hopeful that Lisa's killer is within that group.
We have to come up with a strategy now to try to rule these remaining 11 refusals in or out.
We devised this plan to exercise a rarely used aspect of the law in the grand jury proceedings to compel an individual or individuals to provide a DNA sample.
We didn't want to hit the grand jury with all 11 names, so we came up just randomly, for lack of a better term, let's pick 6 names. So I wanted Gary Scherer in there. He always stood in my mind as, like, I want to go back and get this guy.
So they go door to door and hand deliver these hearing notices to the people on that list.
The next day, a woman who was not known to investigators shows up out of the blue at the police barracks. This woman tells the troopers at the barracks that her boyfriend is missing. And she found 3 very strange letters that he left. Among those letters is what appears to be a confession to the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Lisa Ziegert in 1992.
The letter is written by none other than Gary Sharp. Well, Gary, isn't cloning you were worried about after all? Now is it? Gary Sharp's girlfriend has shown up at the Massachusetts State Police barracks with 3 handwritten letters.
One is essentially a confession letter to the killing of Lisa Ziegert, written by Gary Scherer.
So they open a full-court press. Where is Gary Scherer? Because we want our hands on him.
We started pinging his phone, trying to locate him.
We're able to find Gary's car at a hospital in central Connecticut. There's a note on the dashboard that says something to the effect of, "My apologies to whoever finds my body. Call Mass State Police."
Okay, Gary, where's your body? Because it's not in this car, so now what? They walk into the hospital, and the desk reports he's been signed in as a patient. For what?
He took like a bottle of ibuprofen, which what we felt was his way of, trying to commit suicide. But basically all he got was an upset stomach.
It's an attempt, and a pathetic one at that.
Noah Pack and I did go down there with the intentions of hopefully trying to interview him at his bedside. You're thinking, okay, this is going to be easy. He'll confess to it. And he goes, I'd like to talk to you guys, but I can't. I'm going to talk to my attorney first. It was almost surreal. Like, this is how this is going to play out at the end here.
So they provide Mr. Shara with a new set of jewelry made by Smith & Wesson.
What we need now is a sample of Gary's DNA.
We move for search warrants for his residence on an urgent and emergency basis.
They find personal items that likely contain DNA, including a razor and a toothbrush.
Rush the testing on this toothbrush, and the next day, we have a DNA profile to compare. It's a match. Gary Shara is Lisa Ziegert's killer. And I basically collapsed. It was unbelievable.
There's tears. We both were like, oh my God. It was another surreal moment.
Mr. Shara is the killer. Not Eddie Borgatti, Gary Shara.
Other breaking news at this noon hour. The man accused in the death of Lisa Ziegert over 25 years ago is now pleading guilty to those murder charges. He has since been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I was almost in shock, like, can I really believe this? Because, but no, it's really true. Yes, we got him. We got him, Lisa, we got him. I was so grateful.
Now the world can know that this person did it, that perhaps Lisa will be given some level of respite.
In one of the handwritten confessions, so to speak, Gary Shara talked about never feeling normal, and he talked about how he fantasized about abduction and bondage when it came to his sexual acts with females.
That matches up. That's clearly consistent with the behavior pattern that we saw in this crime.
Our belief at the end of this investigation is that Gary had seen Lisa before and had been in that store.
I feel that he stalked her and had an infatuation with her, and she became his victim.
On April 15th, 1992, he makes his way into the store when he knows that she's alone.
He confronts her. She resists him. He applies force and then more force.
He then forcibly removes her from the store, gets her into his car, and
took her down the road. And sexually assaulted her and eventually murdered her.
He then goes home and he keeps this secret for 25 years. The only person that suspected him was his ex-wife, and she was right.
This case will never, ever go away from me. It's impossible to not feel like you failed. We put him on the back burner so long ago, and now it turns out to be him. Kind of a hard pill to swallow when you think about that. But Having the case solved now makes up for a lot. It really does. And never thought as a detective I would need closure, but I did, so.
The number of things that Lisa was robbed of is almost too many things to contemplate.
You know, sometimes I think it's not so much what she missed out on, but this world has really missed out on her, because I think she had a lot to offer.
I think about Lisa every day. I mean, I truly do. They say if a person is remembered, they're never truly gone. I still go to the mall or go shopping, or I'll be in the grocery store and someone will come up and go, "You look familiar. You're Lisa's mother." That's pretty special.
Human nature is particularly frightening. You can live your life in the best possible way, but bad things happen to nice people. Because there are bad people in the world.
My, you want to look deeper into the abyss? You want to know how a person loses their soul in the blink of an eye? Fine, pull up a chair. I have spent a lifetime looking at the things people do to one another, and let me tell you, the human mind is a dark, twisted forest that most people are terrified to walk through. Let us start with the case of Shirley Pierce. People are strange creatures. They build these little lives, these picket fence dreams, and they do not realize that someone else might be watching from the shadows, fueled by a jealousy so toxic it acts like acid. Marlene Johnson. Remember that name. She lived her life like a theater performance. Everything was about image, about having the right things, about never being told no. When she met her husband, Irvin, she did not just marry a man. She claimed possession. And when she decided in her own warped mind that Shirley Pierce was an intruder, she did not just get angry. She went to war. Imagine the insanity of hiring a private investigator, of using drones to map out a woman's daily routine, of watching her like a hawk, waiting for a single slip-up that never existed. I tell you, you have to be kidding me if you think that is normal behavior. When that July morning in 2013 came, the silence in that Kannapolis home was broken by the sound of a life ending. When I walked into that bathroom, I did not just see a crime scene. I saw a tragedy. The bleach smell was the first thing that hit me. It is a desperate man's perfume, or in this case, a desperate woman's attempt to wash away the evidence of her own darkness. She thought she was clever. She thought bleach destroyed everything. It does not. It leaves patterns. It leaves a trail for those of us who know where to look. When we found the DNA, when we saw the missing tips of her manicured nails, nails meant to look pretty while doing something truly hideous. The facade fell apart. She was not a lady. She was a predator. And then there's the tragedy of the Byrne sisters. This one hits me right in the gut. Barbara and Debbie, two sisters, one life shared in a tiny space, bound by duty and blood. Barbara was a breadwinner, the nurse, the mother, the sister, the everything. She gave her youth to a sibling who could not understand the weight of the burden being carried. When that inheritance of $350,000 landed in their laps, you would think it was a blessing. It was a death sentence. Debbie, with the mind of a 6-year-old, spent it on Star Wars toys and fantasies of internet romances. Barbara watched as her security, her future, and her sanity were drained away, dollar by dollar. Think about the moment it happened. August 14th, a birthday, a dinner that ended in a fistfight. You have to understand, this was not a robbery gone wrong. This was an explosion. A person who had been pushed for 40 years. 40 years of, I need this and I want that, finally reached a ledge. When Barbara pulled that trigger, she was not just killing her sister. She was killing the life she had been forced to live. And the part that keeps me up at night? The 6 weeks. She lived with the smell of death. She used every air freshener on the market to hide it. She was trying to deny the reality of what she had done, keeping the phantom of her sister alive in her mind, because to admit the truth was to admit she was a murderer. When she told me she didn't know what happened, I saw the look in her eyes. It was not a lie. She had checked out. The woman who walked into that room was not the woman who walked out. These are not just statistics, my friend. These are stories of people who let their worst impulses take the wheel. One was driven by a possessive, ego-driven madness, and the other was driven by the crushing weight of a life without an exit. It is a cold world out there, and you never really know what has happened behind closed doors until the blue lights arrive. You have to be careful who you trust, because the most dangerous people are the ones who look exactly like everyone else. Does that satisfy your curiosity, or do you want to see how deep this rabbit hole really goes? Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for reasons so pathetic, so trivial, that it makes you wonder about the very fabric of our society. I have spent a lifetime looking into the abyss of the human heart, and I tell you, it never gets any easier to stomach. You sit across from someone, you look them in the eye, and you realize they have stripped away the humanity of another soul simply because they felt slighted. My, it is a tragedy of the highest order. Let me take you back to the Prescott National Forest in Arizona. It is a place for families, for people riding dirt bikes, for target shooters enjoying the open air. But on the evening of September 29th, 1988, the forest became something else entirely. A man finishing up his day of target practice stumbled upon a fire pit. He saw a pile of garbage, partially burned. He saw what he thought was a stick poking out of the ash, but as he stepped closer, the reality hit him with the force of a hammer. It was an arm. When the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office arrived, they found a scene of absolute brutality. The victim had been dumped, piled with debris, and set on fire. They could not even tell who she was at first. It was horrific. They had no DNA, no advanced technology, just the cold, hard reality of a body burned beyond recognition. The coroner, in his clinical way, called it homicidal violence. But the fire had destroyed so much that determining a specific cause of death was impossible. However, they found heat-killed fly larvae, which told us the body had been there for a significant time. Through dental records, they identified her as 19-year-old Pamela Pitts, a young woman who had vanished 13 days earlier. Now, you have to look at the people closest to her. Pam was a bright, outgoing kid, the kind of person who made friends easily. But at 19, she was ready for independence. She moved in with a girl named Shelley Norgard. And here is where the shadows begin to lengthen. Shelley was a mystery. Nobody knew where she came from, where her parents were. She was just there, a void of a person. She had abandonment issues, and she clung to Pam as if her life depended on it. But it was not a friendship. It was a possessive trap. The rent wasn't getting paid, the relationship was rotting, and Pam had decided to move back home. Shelley was not a person who handled rejection well. When the police questioned her, she spun a web of stories about where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. But the people around them told a different story. They said Shelley was angry. She was stalking around town looking for Pam, telling anyone who would listen that Pam was responsible for everything that was wrong with her life. And the most chilling part? Shelley had been telling people for a long time that she knew exactly how to get rid of a body, either burn it or drop it in a mine shaft. You have to be kidding me. How does a teenager even formulate such a plan? The investigation hit a wall. For years, there was no physical evidence, no murder weapon, and no confession. Then, the silence was broken. In May of 1991, explorers in a cave found a body in a vertical mine shaft. It was Ray Clerks, Shelley's boyfriend. He had been shot in the head, wrapped in a waterbed liner, and dumped like trash. The detectives realized this was the second roommate of Shelley's to go missing and end up dead. They found her fingerprints on a flashlight in that mine shaft. The evidence was mounting, and finally, the walls closed in. Shelley eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for Ray's death, admitting she shot him because he tried to leave her. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. But what about Pam? The family waited for 23 years, holding on to the hope that someone would finally be held accountable. In 2011, a cold case team picked up the file. They listened to 97 jailhouse phone calls that Shelley made during her incarceration. They heard her talking to her father about the investigation, and in a moment of pure, damning silence, the truth hung in the air. That silence was a crack in the armor. In June of 2017, they move in. I stood there and I looked at her, and I saw that look of defiant resignation. When she finally confessed in 2021, it was the same old story. She claimed it was an argument that got out of hand. She said she hit Pam and couldn't stop. She didn't talk about the fire. She didn't talk about the cruelty. She just offered a sanitized version of a brutal murder. She walked out of that courtroom a free woman, having served her time for the other crimes, with the law unable to do much more after 3 decades. It leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. You look at these two lives, Pam and Ray, stolen by a girl who couldn't handle the world moving on without her. They were young, they had potential, and they had lives to lead. And all that remains is the memory of who they were and the bitter lesson that sometimes the most dangerous person you will ever meet is the one sitting across the kitchen table from you. It is a haunting case, one that reminds us that justice is often a slow, grinding process, and sometimes the only thing we can do is hold on to the small victories and never forget the names of those who were taken. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine. I tell you, in my years on the force, I have seen love curdle into obsession and devotion twist into absolute despair. We have 2 tragedies here, bound by the fragile threads of human psychology. Let's start in Rowan County, North Carolina, a quiet place where people expect to live out their days in peace. Shirley Pierce was 62 years old, a woman described by everyone as beautiful, kind, and looking forward to marrying her fiancé, Chuck Reeves. But on a Tuesday morning in July 2013, Chuck found her life violently stolen in her own bathroom. The scene was ferocious. Blood everywhere, water running. A clear attempt to wash away the sins of a very angry intruder. The killer even poured bleach on the carpet to destroy the genetic evidence. My. Criminals always think they are smarter than the police. They watch a few television shows and believe they hold a master's degree in forensic science. But bleach does not wash away stupidity. We looked at Chuck first, naturally. The spouse or lover is always the prime suspect until proven otherwise. But Chuck had an alibi of working out of town, confirmed by his employer, and his hands were as clean as a whistle. No cuts. When you stab someone repeatedly, your hand slips on the blood. You almost always cut yourself. Chuck was clear. Then came the former boyfriend, Richard, a man with a history of domestic violence and a restraining order. But Richard was in such poor health he could barely walk, let alone overpower a vibrant woman. Then the telephone rang. It was Irvin Johnson, a chief financial officer who worked with Shirley. He called 911 to report his own wife, Marlene Johnson, might be the killer. You have to be kidding me. That is not a call you get every day. Marlene was a wealthy, refined woman who suffered a mental breakdown years prior and became relentlessly paranoid that Irvin was having an affair with Shirley. For years, Marlene stalked Shirley, hired private investigators, and even physically assaulted her in a restaurant. She was a woman driven by ego and a phantom jealousy. When my detectives found Marlene, she refused to speak, but her hands spoke volumes. The tips of her manicured nails were missing, and her fingers bore fresh cuts. She had an alibi, a friend named Tim Connor, who claimed she was with him. But when we found a broken knife missing from a set in his kitchen, a knife that matched the blade left inside poor Shirley, Tim folded like a cheap suit. He admitted Marlene asked him to lie. And when the state laboratory matched Marlene to the genetic material left on the shower curtain, The puzzle was complete. Marlene thought she was untouchable, planning a calculated ambush. She threw her life away over a delusion, leaving a trail of devastation because she simply could not stand the thought of not getting her way. She was convicted of first-degree murder, a coward who could not face reality. But sometimes the mind breaks not from jealousy, but from the crushing weight of responsibility. Down in St. Petersburg, Florida, a cleaning crew went to clear out a foreclosed mobile home. The air was thick with the foul stench of death, masked poorly by dozens of air fresheners scattered around the rooms. Under a pile of blankets on a mattress, they found a heavily decomposed body wrapped in plastic. A single gunshot wound to the forehead told us everything we needed to know about the manner of death. It took bone tissue analysis to identify the remains as 40-year-old Debbie Burns. Debbie suffered severe neurological damage as a child and never matured past the age of 6. For 40 years, her older sister Barbara Burns was her sole caretaker. Barbara dropped out of high school at 15 to raise Debbie. She worked minimum wage jobs, completely sacrificing her own existence. When they inherited $350,000, it should have been their salvation. But Debbie spent all on toys and internet scams within 3 years. The money vanished, and Barbara was staring down the barrel, returning to a life of endless servitude and financial ruin. We tracked Barbara to Virginia Beach, where she was cashing the monthly Social Security checks. When we sat her down in the interrogation room, she first denied having a sister at all. A childish lie, born of desperation, but under the weight of the truth, she broke down. She recounted a night of endless arguing over money. She laid in bed, listening to Debbie breathe, knowing the next morning would bring the same screaming, the same demands, the same suffocating reality. Barbara took a gun, placed it to the head of her sister, and pulled the trigger. She wrapped the body, filled the house with air fresheners, and ran back to the only place she remembered being happy as a child. I tell you, this case is the epitome of a good person doing a very bad thing. Barbara was pushed past the absolute limits of human endurance. She did not kill out of greed or malice, but out of profound, tragic exhaustion. She accepted a plea for manslaughter and served her time quietly. 2 vastly different motives, 2 completely different minds. One driven by entitled obsession, the other shattered by a lifetime of solitary burden, both ending in the ultimate, irreversible sin. We lock away the guilty, but we can never truly wash away the sorrow they leave behind. That is the grim reality of this job. Chào bạn. Dưới đây là toàn bộ hồ sơ vụ án được thuật lại qua góc nhìn và phong cách của Trung úy Joe Kenda. Giữ nguyên ngôn ngữ gốc tiếng Anh và tuân thủ tuyệt đối quy định viết chữ cho toàn bộ các con số. Không chứa ký tự đặc biệt, được trình bày thành một mạch văn duy nhất. Humans are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. A perceived slight, a bruised ego, or a few dollars in unpaid rent. I tell you, in my years of looking at the dark side of the human soul, it never ceases to amaze me how little a human life is worth to a monster. On the evening of September 29, 1988, a target shooter is finishing up his night in the Prescott National Forest. He walks past a fire pit and sees what he thinks is a stick poking out of the ash. He gets closer. It is a human arm. He runs to a drugstore to call 911. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office arrives at Gordo's pit. What they find is horrific. The body is burned beyond recognition, a profound lack of respect. You have to be an incredibly cold individual to do this to another human being. Through dental records, we get a name. Pamela Pitts, 19 years old. A bright, beautiful girl with a zest for life. The oldest of 4. A protector, a mentor, a daughter deeply loved by her family. She had dreams of beauty college or fashion design. But someone decided her future ended in the dirt. Her family is devastated. As an investigator, you carry that grief. It fuels you. Pam had moved in with a friend named Shelley Norgard. Shelley was 18 years old. She was an awkward girl, carrying the baggage of a broken home, desperate for connection. But this was no sisterhood. Things soured. Money became an issue over the rent. Pam was ready to move back home. Shelley did not like that. Shelley had severe abandonment issues. When you corner someone who fears being left behind, they lash out. Pam goes missing on September 16th. We look at the inner circle. Bobby Kitchener, the boyfriend, is cleared. Then we look at Shelley. She tells a story about driving around all night between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning. A convenient alibi, but full of holes. We talked to her boyfriend, Ray Clerks. Ray cannot confirm her story. He says she came home at 11:30, then backpedals and says maybe it was 2:30. And then the whispers start. Friends say Shelley was angry that night. She was hunting for Pam. She told people that Pam was responsible for everything wrong in her life. And here's the kicker. Shelley had a habit of bragging about how to dispose of a body. She said the best way is to burn them beyond recognition or drop them in a mine shaft. You have to be kidding me. When a suspect hands you their playbook, you read it. But knowing who did it and proving it are two very different things. We searched the apartment. There is no physical evidence. The town is swept up in rumors of satanic cults and ritualistic sacrifices. Nonsense. The rumor mill is a distraction. Investigators even look at a girl named Melinda Perry because of a reported fight at a park. Melinda is brought before a grand jury and even charged with perjury, but her alibi holds up. The case goes cold. It sits on a shelf. But a murder case is never truly closed. You wait. You wait for the killer to make a mistake. Fast forward to May 25th, 1991. College kids exploring a cave find a vertical mine shaft. And at the bottom, wrapped in a waterbed liner, is a body shot in the head. The victim is 24-year-old Ray Clerks, Shelley Norgard's boyfriend. The same man who could not confirm her alibi. He was planning to move to California without her. Another abandonment, another murder, and exactly the disposal method Shelley bragged about. My, the arrogance of it. This time she is sloppy. A fingerprint is found on a flashlight left in the mine. Detectives smell the odor of decomposition in her car. They find Ray's blood in her trunk. Shelley is arrested on June 4th, 1991. She eventually pleads guilty to second-degree murder. She claims they were stargazing. He broke things off, so she shot him on the hood of the car, panicked, and dumped his body. She is sentenced to 20 years in prison. Pam's family hopes this is the domino that falls. But it takes time. 18 long years of silence. In March 2011, a cold case team blows the dust off Pam's file. Detective Dart looks at it and realizes Shelley is sitting in prison, highly capable of murder and due for release. They interview her in February. They monitor 97 jailhouse calls. Nothing. She gets out in May. She marries, assumes a new life as Shelley Harmon. But in the spring of 2017, the detective listens to those 97 calls again. And there it is, a conversation with her father. Her father says he had been thinking for 20 years, and she never told him what actually happened. The line goes dead silent. That silence is a confession. On June 2nd, 2017, Shelley is arrested for the murder of Pamela Pitts. She had a look of defiant resignation. The case is old. Witnesses are gone or have lost their memories. The prosecution is cornered into offering a plea deal. On March 1st, 2021, Shelley stands in court. She says she found Pam at the party. They argued, she hit her, and kept hitting her until she stopped breathing. She calls a fight. I call it murder. She refuses to talk about burning the body. She gets no extra time because of the years she already served. She is released from custody at the age of 50. It is a bitter pill to swallow. But she stood in a courtroom and admitted she took the life of her best friend. I want the world to know what Shelley Harmon is. She murdered two people she claimed to love. Pam was a fireball, full of life and joy. Her memory remains untarnished by the monster who took her. Humans are strange creatures, but the truth always outlasts them. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill each other for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. You see a young woman, bright, full of life, and then in the blink of an eye, Everything is reduced to ash at a desolate trash burning spot. My, it is absolutely horrific. I have been in this business for decades, and I tell you, cruelty knows no bounds. On the evening of September 29th, 1988, in the Prescott National Forest, a target shooter inadvertently stumbled into hell. He saw a pile of garbage and what looked like a stick poking up from the ashes. But no, it was a human arm. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene known as Gordo's Pit, where they found the body of 19-year-old Pamela Pitts, burned beyond recognition. You know, it was an incredibly brutal and demeaning act. The autopsy revealed heat kill fly larvae, a clue suggesting the time of death was 13 days prior. Her family was devastated. A smart, vibrant girl, a wonderful big sister, suddenly vanished. She was living with her friend, Shelley Norgard, a girl who seemed awkward and mysterious, carrying deep-seated issues regarding abandonment. As the first pieces were laid down, the picture looked twisted. Money disputes, lies, and a friendship that was falling apart. I tell you, killers always leave a trail, no matter how hard they try to hide it. Shelley told a story about going to the movies and out for dinner, but nobody could verify her timeline. Friends of Shelley even mentioned she had boasted about knowing how to dispose of a body by burning it or dumping it down a mine shaft. It is laughable and terrifying all at once. The case went cold after years of hitting dead ends. But evil, it does not know how to stay quiet. In May of 1991, a body was found down a vertical mine shaft, wrapped in a waterbed liner. It was Ray Clerks, the boyfriend of Shelley. They shot him in the head. You're starting to see a pattern here, aren't you? 2 people who lived with her, 2 people who vanished, and 2 people who ended their lives in tragedy. When investigators found Shelley's fingerprint on a flashlight at the mine shaft and the smell of death in the trunk of her car, the game was up. She confessed to killing Ray because he was planning to leave her. But what about Pam? It took 23 years, until 2011, for a cold case team to reopen the file. They listened to recorded jail calls between her and her father, and finally, a dead silence on the line said it all. In March of 2021, after 33 years of waiting, Shelley finally confessed to beating Pam until she stopped breathing at a party that night. She killed her friend, burned her body, and went on with her life as if nothing had happened. She served her time, but you know, for me, justice is a fragile thing. A killer takes the lives of 2 people she claimed to love, and then she walks out of prison. This world is crazy, I tell you that much. That is the cold, hard truth, and you have to accept it, no matter how bitter it may taste. Would you like me to delve deeper into the psychological state of Shelley Norgard, or analyze the investigative failures that caused this case to drag on for so long? Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most foolish reasons you can possibly imagine. Money, greed, desperation. But when that greed leads a daughter to take the life of the very mother who gave her birth and raised her, well, I have to tell you, that is the ultimate degradation. My, that is exactly what I witnessed in LaGrange, Georgia, back in February of 1991. Margaret Abernathy was a powerful woman, a businesswoman respected by the entire town. She had it all, but she also had a daughter named Priscilla. The relationship between them appeared unbreakable, until the numbers in the financial books started telling a different story. Priscilla ran the family car dealership, but she was sinking in debt. She had engaged in a check-kiting scheme, a type of fraud that any investigator can see through in a heartbeat. When Margaret discovered the truth, she made the decision to strip Priscilla of her access to the accounts. You have to understand this. For those blinded by greed, this is not just about losing money. It is a collapse of the entire world they have built upon lies. On Monday, February 4th, 1991, Priscilla called 911. She spoke of a burglary, claiming her mother had been gravely injured. When we arrived at the scene, the setup was so poorly staged that it was almost laughable. A rear window had been broken, but the glass shards were lying on the outside. Can you believe that? What kind of intruder breaks a window from inside the house to create a crime scene? I tell you, these criminals are often far too confident in their own perceived brilliance. Margaret had been shot twice in the head. The first shot did not kill her immediately. The evidence at the scene showed she had attempted to clean the blood with tissue in the bathroom. That means she endured that agony for a period of time before the killer returned to deliver the second shot to the brain stem, a cruelty that simply cannot be forgiven. Priscilla attempted to provide a schedule so detailed that it became suspicious. But witnesses at a convenience store and a neighbor across the street placed her right at the scene during the time of the crime. She lied. And in our line of work, the one who lies is almost always the one who is guilty. Even after the crime, Priscilla went as far as attempting to coach a witness over the telephone. She did not possess a shred of remorse. She was only terrified of being caught. At the trial in August of 1992, the jury saw right through that facade. Priscilla Matula was sentenced to life in prison. A tragic end for a family that once had everything. You know, family is the only thing we truly have in this world. But for some, money holds more value than the blood ties that bind us. It is truly disgusting. One case, one betrayal, and one life stolen by the very person the victim loved most. You ask me how I feel? I feel for Margaret. She did not deserve that fate at the hands of her own daughter. That is a bitter truth I had confront throughout my entire career as an investigator. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine. Sometimes, you look at a crime and wonder if it is pure malice or just a desperate scream of the soul that has been cornered for far too long. My, this is the story of two sisters, Barbara and Debbie, a relationship built on sacrifice that ended in the chilling silence of death. You have to understand that Barbara Byrne spent most of her life caring for her brain-damaged younger sister. That is a burden not everyone can shoulder. When their mother passed away, and then their brother followed, they were left with a $350,000 inheritance. You think money brings happiness, right? You are wrong. Money only reveals the true nature of a person. They lived a fantasy life, traveling everywhere, shopping wildly until the money ran out, and the harsh reality came crashing down when the police and the cleaning crew stepped into that mobile home in St. Petersburg. They were met with a foul odor that, I tell you, you would never forget. The smell of decomposition. They found Debbie's body in the bedroom, wrapped in blankets, sheets, and surrounded by dozens of air fresheners scattered all over the place. You have to be kidding me. They used everything, from scented wax to baking soda, just to mask a rotting secret. Can you believe it? The older sister lived with the decomposing body of her own sibling for months. Was it denial, or was it a complete loss of sanity? I have seen many crime scenes, but living with a decomposing corpse is something the average mind simply cannot process. Barbara, who was once a dedicated worker, a caretaker who sacrificed everything, finally collapsed under the relentless demands of her sister. In the interrogation room, she initially tried to deceive us, denying everything, even claiming she had no siblings at all. But lies are just a flimsy veil for a heartbreaking truth. She confessed that she and her sister had a horrific argument, and she simply could not take it anymore. One shot, a single bullet to the forehead, and everything came to an end. You think that after all those years of sacrifice, it would end with a bullet. I am not justifying a crime, but I understand the limits of human endurance. When Barbara confessed, it was not with malice, but with a pain she herself could not comprehend. She said she did not know what happened, that it felt like a nightmare. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter to avoid the death penalty and received a 15-year sentence. After 12 years, she was released. Now, Barbara is back in society, carrying the grief of the sister she killed. Humans are complex entities. Barbara was not a cold-blooded killer in the traditional sense. She was the product of a grim set of circumstances where kindness was worn down until only hatred remained. It is a sad ending for both sisters, one who lost her life and one who lost her own humanity in the process. That is the nature of mankind. Sometimes we create devils out of the kindest people. This case is a heartbreaking testament to the fact that human patience has tangible limits. With my experience as an investigator, I have often observed that crime is not always driven by greed or sudden hatred, but sometimes it is a result of a long, compounding psychological pressure that has no outlet. Would you like me to delve deeper into an analysis of the psychological breakdown of long-term caregivers, such as in the case of Barbara? Human beings are strange creatures. They kill each other for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, and in this case, it was a chaotic mess of greed, exotic birds, and an uncontrollable ego. Let me tell you about a man named Fred Brown. Fred was a good man, a truly decent guy, the kind of person you want in your life as a friend. But his life ended in a grassy ditch by a roadside in a small North Carolina town in 1991. When I look at cases like these, I wonder if the perpetrators ever stop to think about the meaninglessness of their actions. But the answer is usually no, because greed has blinded them. 1991, April 25th, a spring morning that seemed perfectly ordinary in High Point, until a body was discovered. Fred lay there, face down with 2 shots to his head and 1 to his back. You know, if it were a random robbery, the killer would never have gotten close enough to step on the victim's back to fire. This was a cold, calculated execution. I tell you, the brutality of it sends shivers down my spine. When Major Tom Shepard arrived at the scene, he found a man he had known his entire life, a high school friend. And that is a tragedy that should have never happened. Everything began to change after his wife, Patricia Brown, underwent heart surgery in 1990. After that, she started collecting exotic birds, dozens of them, filling the house, while Fred worked hard, trying to appease her, even renovating the home to accommodate the creatures. But Fred's devotion was met with resentment. Kenneth Vaughn, a friend of Fred's, recalled that Fred was so fearful, he told him he would not be surprised if Pat put a contract out on him. You have to be kidding me. A wife wanting her husband dead. But that is exactly what it was. Fred told his friend that the family would be better off with him dead. And he was right. Except it was not a sacrifice. It was a murder for insurance and money. Leroy Wetzel, the man hired to do the dirty work, was a guy with a short fuse and a long rap sheet. And he carried out the murder under the direction of Pat and her sister, Sheila, after a phone call was placed that very night. Leroy lured Fred to the road by faking a car breakdown, and then, with the coldness of a stone-cold killer, he took the life of a father and a husband for $30,000 that he never even fully received. 3 years later, the very letters Leroy left behind with the words to be opened only when I die brought light into the darkness of this case. When Leroy walked into the courtroom, a small, heavily tattooed man with a long beard, he brought the entire room to a dead silence as he reenacted the murder. It was an unforgettable sight. Pat Brown was sentenced to life in prison and passed away not long after, leaving behind a family destroyed for reasons that are truly inexcusable. Humans can become so vicious when money clouds their conscience. I do not know, but I know for certain that Fred Brown deserved much better. You see, this case is clear proof that wickedness often does not come from strangers, but from the very people we trust the most. I could spend all day talking about human nature, about why a woman would trade 20 years of marriage for birds and a bit of insurance money. But the truth is that sometimes the darkness within a person is something that even the light of justice cannot fully explain. Would you like to delve deeper into the psychology of these accomplices? Or should we take a closer look at the investigation process that finally pulled back the veil of secrecy? Consistencies start to pile up. The dipstick shows the oil is full. The scene does not match the story. We dig into their life, and we find a web of lies. She isolated him. She made him turn away from his own parents. She was a master of the con. And then we find Timot, a soft-spoken man, a man caught in her orbit. He thinks he is talking to a woman named Demi. He thinks he is helping a victim of abuse. He is a pawn, a useful idiot. And he confesses to a murder plot that was cooked up by a woman who played multiple roles. She invented Demi. She invented TJ. She was a flight attendant who did not exist. It is chilling. They discussed how to kill him, poison, shooting, and finally, a baseball bat and wire in an apartment, a bedroom filled with blood, not a driveway. She manipulated him to do the dirty work while she played the grieving widow. She even had him take out a life insurance policy and made herself the beneficiary. You want to talk about evil? That is the definition. She is a black hole of human compassion. She goes to trial. She denies it all. She plays the split personality card, claiming she does not remember. You can hide behind a mental defect, but you cannot hide from the truth. She was convicted, and she spent the rest of her life behind bars. Bernie James deserved better. Those children deserved a mother who loved them, not a monster who used them for money and sympathy. I tell you, evil has a face, and sometimes it looks exactly like the person you trust the most. Humans are strange creatures. They kill for reasons so trivial, so foolish, that you can hardly wrap your head around it. You see, the person you share your bed with, the person who cooks your meals, they might be the very same person planning your exit from this world. You think you know what happens behind closed doors, but let me tell you, you have no idea. It was March 24th, 1987, in Wilton Manors, Florida, a quiet, sleepy little bedroom community where people went to escape the noise of life. It was a place where crime was supposed to be a stranger, but that night, it walked right through the front door. Bernie James, a 37-year-old firefighter, a former Marine, a man who survived the horrors of Vietnam, was found in his own vehicle, slumped over with blunt trauma to his head and ligature marks around his neck. You have to be kidding me. He was a man who gave everything to his family, a man who had lost his first wife to a medical tragedy and was just trying to build a new life for his 3 children. He thought he found salvation in a woman named Patty. She had a deep physical scar on her face, and he didn't see a deformity. He saw a person worthy of love. But he was wrong. Oh, he was so wrong. Patty told the police a story about a stranger, a black man she saw talking to her husband just before he was killed. She spun a tale of a mysterious assailant, but the scene told a completely different story. We look at the facts, and the facts do not care about your feelings. The vehicle was a stage, not a crime scene. There was no oil change needed. Yet the cans were there. There was a wallet, rifled through and discarded, which makes no sense for a robbery. You do not rob a man and leave his ID and credit cards right there on the ground. The lack of blood in that car, given the severity of the injury, was the final nail in the coffin of her story. It did not happen there. Then we found Timot. You look at a man like that, and you realize how easily a predator finds their prey. Patty had been living a double life, pretending to be a flight attendant named TJ, and then another persona, Demi, to manipulate this man into doing her dirty work. She was a scam artist, a professional liar who used her own children for financial gain and isolated her husband from the world. She decided that since she could not handle the rejection of a divorce, she would just get rid of him. She thought she was clever. She thought she could hide behind her made-up identities and her tears. She had him take out a life insurance policy and made herself the sole beneficiary. It is a classic tale of greed and control. During the investigation, she sat there and told us she did not remember being part of the murder. I tell you, evil is not some boogeyman on the bed. It is the person sitting in your living room, drinking your coffee and planning your funeral. When the truth finally came out, when the walls closed in and the evidence laid bare the cold, calculated nature of her scheme, she was convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison where she belongs. Bernie James was a good man, a man who loved his children and tried to do the right thing. And he was taken by a monster who wore a mask of affection. You look at a case like this, and it stays with you. It reminds you that the most dangerous thing in this world is not a stranger in the dark. It is the person who claims to love you when you turn out the lights. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most pathetic reasons imaginable, and they do it while wearing a mask of normalcy that would fool the best of us. You have to be kidding me. Bernie James was a man who served his country in the Marines, who put his life on the line as a firefighter and a paramedic, and who just wanted to build a family. He met a woman named Patty, and he did not see the scars she carried on her face or the ones hidden in her soul. He saw a person in need, and he offered her his life, his home, and his children. He was a man with a big heart, and that was exactly why he was targeted. In the late 1980s, in the quiet bedroom community of Wilton Manors, Florida, this tragedy unfolded. On the night of March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 post-meridium, a 911 call reported a scene that would haunt any investigator. Bernie James was found in his vehicle, blunt force trauma to the head, right side, over the ear, and signs of ligature marks on his neck. This was not a random robbery. Despite what the scene was staged to look like, it was a calculated execution. When we arrived, the family was there, and the story they told was full of holes. Patty claimed she was just inside the house, that she saw him talking to a mysterious man, a black man looking for matches. It was a classic deflection, a story designed to lead us away from her front door. But the evidence told a different story. The vehicle, the oil cans, the wallet strewn about, none of it made sense. Someone who actually commits a robbery does not inventory the wallet at the scene and leave the credit cards behind. We realized then that somebody was lying, and we knew who it was. We dug into their lives and found that Patty was not just a grieving wife. She was a professional manipulator. She was pretending to be other people, calling herself Demi, calling herself TJ, creating a web of lies so complex it took us time to unravel. She even involved a man named Tim Ott, turning him into the weapon she needed to destroy the person she could no longer control. She had convinced him that she was abused, that she was a victim, and that Bernie had to die. Imagine that. She was pulling the strings, orchestrating the murder of her own husband, all while playing the part of the devoted mother and wife. We found the blood in the apartment that she said never happened. We found the truth beneath the layers of deception. She was using everyone around her, including her own children, for her own selfish gains. When we finally put the pieces together, when we confronted the reality of her double and triple lives, it became clear that she was a predator. She wanted to keep her life, keep her insurance money, and keep her control, and she was willing to discard a good man to do it. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, and frankly, that is exactly where she belongs. I tell you, evil does not look like a monster. It looks like the person you love, the person you trust, the person sitting across the table from you. In my line of work, you learn that people are not always who they say they are, and sometimes the most dangerous thing you can ever do is open your door to someone who claims to have no one else in the world. It is a sad, cold reality, but it is the truth of the job. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons, and they lie even when the truth is screaming from floorboards. You think you know someone. You think you know who you are sleeping next to at night. My. You have no idea. I have seen it all. I tell you, evil has a way of hiding in plain sight, dressed up in the clothes of a loving wife or concerned neighbor. This is the story of Bernie James, a good man who made one mistake. He trusted the wrong person. It was the late 1980s in Wilton Manors, Florida. It was a quiet little place, a bedroom community where people moved to get away from the noise of Fort Lauderdale. It was a low-crime area. People did not go around hurting each other there. But on March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, everything changed. We received an urgent call. A family was reporting a tragedy outside their home. Bernie James, a 37-year-old man, was found in his vehicle. His wife, Patty, claimed she found him there with the passenger seat reclined. The family tried to save him, They tried to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. But when the emergency services arrived, it was already too late. Bernie James was dead. When I looked at the scene, something was wrong. You learn to trust your gut in this line of work. The victim had blunt force trauma to the right side of his head and ligature marks around his neck. He had been strangled. Now ask yourself, does that happen in a car? You have no room to swing a weapon. You have no room to properly strangle a man. The physics just do not add up. Then there was the blood, or rather, the lack of it. There should have been a tremendous amount of blood at the scene of the injury, but the car was clean. You have to be kidding me. Someone was telling a fairy tale, and they expected me to believe it. Patty James, the grieving wife, had a story. She said she had just come from the grocery store. She said Bernie was outside to fix an electrical problem and perform an oil change. She claimed she saw a black man asking for matches, then went inside, and came back 20 minutes later to find her husband lifeless. That is a convenient story, but the facts did not support it. We checked the dipstick in the car. It was full. He was not doing an oil change. Then there was the wallet, lying on the ground near the vehicle, rifled through but empty of cash. That is not how a robbery happens. A robber takes the wallet and runs. They do not sit there and inventory the contents. That was a setup. It was theater. We started digging into the relationship, and what we found was not a marriage. It was a prison. Bernie was a former Marine, a firefighter, a paramedic. He had 3 young children and had lost his first wife. He was looking for someone to help him keep his family together. He found Patty. She had a deep, noticeable scar on her face, and she let that scar define her. She thought she was hideous. She was insecure, and she was manipulative. Bernie did not see the scar. He saw the person inside. But the monster inside was the one that mattered. Patty had isolated those children. She had isolated Bernie from his own family. We learned that she had been married before, and those marriages ended in divorce. She could not handle rejection. Bernie had decided he had enough. He wanted out. He wanted a divorce. And we found out he had taken out a life insurance policy, with Patty as the only beneficiary. The motive was as old as time. Greed. Cold, hard, calculated greed. But the story got even weirder. We brought in a man named Timot. He was the one who actually killed Bernie. And when we spoke to him, he did not know who Bernie James or Patty James were. He knew them as Booth and Demi. You see, Patty was playing a game. She was pretending to be a flight attendant named TJ, and she was pretending to be a woman named Demi. She was building a web of lies so complex that she convinced this man, Timot, that she was being abused and that she needed her husband dead to be safe. She manipulated him into committing the murder. She even sat with him and discussed different ways to kill her husband. They talked about poison. They talked about shooting him. And finally, they settled on the blunt force trauma and strangulation in Tim's apartment. We found the blood there on the carpet, even after he tried to clean it up. Patty James was a master of deception. She was a con artist who used her own children in her schemes. She pretended her son was deaf to scam churches out of money. She was capable of anything. When she was finally caught, she had the audacity to claim she did not remember any of it. She tried to blame a split personality. It was all a charade. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Justice was served, but it did not bring Bernie back. It never does. A good man lost his life because he fell for a woman who lived for herself. That is the tragedy of it all. People are not always who they claim to be, and sometimes the monster is sleeping right beside you, and you never even hear them breathe. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, and sometimes those reasons are built on a foundation of lies so thick you could pave a highway with them. I tell you, you see the worst of humanity when you wear this badge long enough. You think you've seen every flavor of evil, and then something like this comes along, and you just have to shake your head and ask yourself, how did we get here? Let us look at Bernie James. A man who served 2 tours in Vietnam, a firefighter, a paramedic. He had a heart the size of a mountain. He lost his first wife to an aneurysm in 1980. He was left with 3 children under 3 years old. It breaks my heart just thinking about it. He needed help. He needed a partner. Along comes Patty. She had a scar that defined her, and in her mind, it made her worthless. She played the victim. She played the mother. She got him to move to Florida. But in 1987, in the quiet town of Wilton Manors, everything came crashing down. We get the call on March 24th at 9:22 in the evening. They said they found him in his car. Blunt trauma to the right side of the head, ligature marks around the neck, asphyxiation. The man did not have a chance. You have to be kidding me. A wallet left behind at the scene? No cash. But credit cards sitting there like a souvenir? That is not a robbery. That is a stage play. And the oil change story? The dipstick was full. You do not change oil in a full car. Folks, the incompetence of some people when they try to outsmart the truth. Then there is this Tim Ott. This poor fool was manipulated by not one but 2 people, or so he thought. Demi and TJ. Both were Patty. She played him like a fiddle. She convinced him that Bernie was a child molester, a danger to everyone. She convinced him to bash a man's head in and strangle the life out of him. She even made him believe TJ existed, a woman he never met, just to keep him on the hook. It is a level of deception that takes a special kind of person. She did not want a marriage. She wanted a slave. And when she could not keep him, she wanted him gone. She had him take out life insurance and cut his own children out of the policy. She was cold. She was calculated. And when we finally brought her in, she had the audacity to play the personality disorder card, claiming she did not remember the murder, that it must have been her imaginary friend TJ. I have sat across from many killers in my time, but there is a special place in the bin for those who use their children as pawns and orchestrate the death of a man who just wanted to be loved. When we look at people like Patty, we are looking at the dark side of the human soul. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life. And frankly, that is exactly where she belongs. You can lie to the police. You can lie to your family. You can lie to yourself. But eventually, the truth catches up with you. It always does. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for most trivial, pathetic reasons you can imagine. You see a man like Bernie James, a man who spent his life pulling people out of fire, only to be burned by the one person he trusted to keep his house a home. It is a tragedy, plain and simple, but in my line of work, we do not have the luxury of grieving. We have to look at the cold, hard facts. And the facts in this case were screaming at us from the very beginning. In the late 1980s, Wilton Manors, Florida, was a quiet place. A bedroom community, low crime, the kind of place where people went to escape the noise. But on March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, the silence was shattered by a 911 call. Bernie James, a 37-year-old former Marine and firefighter, was found unresponsive in his vehicle. His family, his wife Patty and her kin, were there. They pulled him out. They performed chest compressions. They did everything by the book. But the man was gone. You look at a scene like that, and you think, what on earth happened here? The first thing you do is look at the victim. Bernie James was a good man. He was the eldest of 9 children. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He was a paramedic. He was the guy you wanted in your corner when the world was falling apart. He had been a widower, losing his first wife to an aneurysm in 1980, leaving him with 3 small children. He was struggling, and then he met Patty. She had a deep, noticeable scar on her face, and Bernie, being the man he was, looked past the surface. He saw a person, not a mark. He trusted her. He adopted her into his life. He moved them all to Florida for a fresh start. And 3 years later, he is dead in his own driveway. The story Patty told us was filled with holes. She said they were doing an oil change. They checked the vehicle, and the oil level was perfectly full. You have to be kidding me. That is not how an oil change works. She told us she went inside to tend the kids, and when she came back out, he was dead. She claimed a man, a black male she had never seen before, was talking to him about matches to light a cigar. A 6-foot-tall man in a quiet neighborhood, and no one saw a thing. Then there's the wallet. It was rifled through and tossed on the ground, but his credit cards were still inside. If you're robbing a man, you take the money and you run. You do not stop to inventory the wallet in the middle of the driveway. Somebody is not telling the truth. We looked into their marriage, and the picture was not pretty. It was a cycle of screaming matches, isolation, and control. Patty was a master deception. She was using her own children to scam churches, pretending her son was deaf just to squeeze money out of people. It makes you sick. She was a con artist in every sense of the word. We found out that Bernie was planning to leave her. He had called his mother in 1985, saying he was done. He was going to file for divorce. That is a motive, but she had another one. She had him take out a life insurance policy, and she made sure she was the only beneficiary. Then we get to the accomplice. Tim Ott. The investigation takes a turn into the bizarre. We bring him in, and he is a soft-spoken, intelligent man who acts like he has never heard of Bernie James. He only knows a woman named Demi and another woman named TJ, a flight attendant. He tells us about a murder plot. He tells us about using Valium in a cake, about trying to shoot him, and finally, about bashing his head in with a bat and using wire to strangle the life out of him. And then the truth comes out. Demi and TJ were the same person. They were Patty James. She created these fake personas to manipulate Tim into doing her dirty work. She was pulling the strings the entire time. The scene at Tim Ott's apartment sealed the deal. We used luminol, and the place lit up. There was blood, despite his attempt to clean it. That confirmed the crime did not happen in the car. It happened in that apartment. And then they moved him. When we finally put the cuffs on Patty at the school, you could see the monster behind the eyes. She tried to play the victim one last time, claiming she suffered abuse, claiming she did not remember anything, claiming the other personality, TJ, was responsible. You have to be kidding me. There is no other personality. There is just a woman who decided that the life of her husband was worth less than the insurance. Pay out in her own twisted control. She was convicted, and she was sentenced to life. That is where she belongs. It is a cold, calculated reality, but that is the truth of it. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine, and yet they are surprised when we show up to put the handcuffs on them. I tell you it happens every single day. My, you have to be kidding me. You look at a man like Bernie James, a good man, a father, a veteran, a guy who just wanted to build a life for his children after losing his wife to an aneurysm. He thought he found happiness in a woman named Patty. He did not see the darkness hiding behind a physical scar on her face. He saw a person worth loving. But as I always say when a person closes the door at night, nobody knows what goes on inside. On March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, we got the call. Bernie James was found in his vehicle, his life snuffed out by blunt force trauma and strangulation. You have to be kidding me. His wife, Patty, tells us a story about a stranger a black man looking for. Matches a story that fell apart faster than a house of cards. The oil cans in the car, the full dipstick, when he was supposedly doing an oil change the wallet. Tossed aside like trash. It was a sloppy stage play, and she was a terrible actress. She claimed she did not know anything, that she was not part of the murder, even blaming some imaginary friend named TJ, or another persona she called Demi. She was a master of deception, a snake in the grass, using her own children as pawns for money and sympathy. She had him take out a life insurance policy and made sure she was the only beneficiary. Pure evil. That is the only word for it. She manipulated a man named Tim, creating these fake personas to orchestrate a murder because she could not handle the idea of her husband leaving her. She was a person who could not handle rejection, so she decided to erase him. We found the blood in the apartment. We found the truth, and we made sure she never saw the light of day again as a free woman. I tell you, the capacity for humans to destroy one another is endless, but fortunately for the truth, so is our patience in digging it out. In the quiet suburban landscape of Arlington, Texas, the morning of the 10th of June, 2012, shattered the peace of a hard-working immigrant family and left a seasoned police department grappling with a crime of unprecedented brutality. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, a couple who had traversed the Pacific to build a life in the United States, were discovered murdered in the seclusion of their own apartment closet. Their deaths did not merely constitute a homicide. They represented the tragic collapse of an American dream that had been systematically undermined by fear, manipulation, and profound human avarice. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, the initial visual cues suggested a robbery gone wrong, or perhaps a localized act of gang violence. A blue bandana tied around a beer bottle and signs of a struggle led investigators to theorize that local agitators had targeted the residents. Yet, as the investigation deepened, the reality proved far more unsettling. The evidence was, in the words of investigators, too perfect, appearing meticulously staged to lead authorities away from the truth. The couple, deeply rooted in their traditional heritage and spiritual beliefs, had been navigating a tumultuous path, faced with the erosion of their commercial sewing business and the weight of financial instability. They turned to a practice rooted in mysticism, seeking to remove what they perceived as spiritual curses that hindered their fortune. This vulnerability paved the way for a predatory figure named Daphne Wright, operating from Houston. Wright positioned herself as a spiritual advisor capable of manifesting protection and prosperity. Over the course of their association, the couple poured their resources into this relationship, accumulating a staggering debt estimated between $250,000 and $280,000. When the debts became insurmountable and the promised fortune failed to materialize, the dynamic shifted from financial exploitation to cold-blooded violence. Wright orchestrated a plot to recoup her perceived losses through life insurance policies, manipulating Bobby Guillory and his nephew, Willie Guillory, to carry out the act. The brutal reality of the crime, which involved the suffocation of the victims with over 25 feet of duct tape for the wife and 10 feet for the husband, underscores the extreme nature of the desperation and greed involved. As the legal proceedings unfolded years later, the narrative shifted toward the culpability of all parties involved. While Willie Guillory, who was a minor at the time of the event, and his uncle Bobby confessed to the physical act of murder, the legal system focused heavily on the culpability of Daphne Wright. In the year 2019, a jury found Wright guilty of capital murder, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her conviction provided a measure of justice, though it left lingering questions regarding the immunity granted to the son-in-law of the victims, Chow Tran, whose testimony proved essential to the prosecution. The story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee serves as a somber reflection on the dangers of predatory manipulation within vulnerable communities. It highlights how profound desire for security and the adherence to traditional beliefs can be exploited by individuals devoid of empathy. Ultimately, this case remains a harrowing reminder that even in the most tightly knit communities, darkness can find a foothold when greed is allowed to masquerade as salvation, and that the pursuit of justice is often a long, complex, and emotionally taxing endeavor that leaves no one truly untouched by the tragedy. It is a somber duty to recount the tragedy that unfolded in the suburban landscape of Arlington, Texas, where the quiet life of an immigrant couple became the center of a profound and heartrending investigation. As we look at this story, we see not merely a criminal case, but a reflection on the universal human need for belonging, the vulnerability that can arise during times of immense pressure, and the courage required of law enforcement to seek truth when the surface of events is deliberately obscured by deception. In the year 2012, a family that had journeyed from Vietnam to build a legacy in the United States of America found their aspirations cruelly interrupted. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee were pillars of their community, individuals who worked tirelessly to provide for their children and grandchildren through a commercial sewing business. Like many who arrive in a new land with dreams of prosperity, they carried with them the traditions and beliefs of their heritage. When their business faced severe economic hardships, they turned to those traditions, seeking solace and guidance through spiritual advisors, hoping to lift the burdens of debt and misfortune. This search for hope, however, would lead them into the grasp of an individual who exploited their faith for material gain. The reality of their fate was discovered on the morning of June 10, 2012, when a welfare check prompted by their concerned son-in-law revealed a scene of unimaginable sorrow. Law enforcement officers, arriving at the residence, found themselves confronting a crime so brutal and calculated that it shook even the most seasoned investigators. The victims had been restrained and silenced in a manner that suggested a terrifying finality. For those who entered that home, the focus shifted instantly from a welfare check to a search for justice. The investigators were met with what appeared to be a scene staged to mimic gang violence, complete with symbolic items meant to mislead authorities. Yet, the intuition of the detectives, honed over decades of service, suggested that this was not the work of random outsiders, but an act of chillingly personal betrayal. The investigation proved to be a long and arduous journey through shadows. For 3 years, the case remained cold, the trail seemingly vanished. It was only through the eventual expansion of the National Genetic Database, necessitated by an unrelated incident involving a theft, that a breakthrough finally emerged. The discovery of genetic evidence at the scene, which had initially lacked a match, suddenly connected to a young man who had been a minor at the time of the crime. This revelation cracked the facade of the orchestrated scene. What unfolded was a narrative of manipulation where a spiritual advisor, named Daphne Wright, had turned a position of trust into a weapon of destruction. As the truth came to light, it became clear that the couple had been caught in a cycle of financial exploitation that escalated to a murderous demand for payment. The orchestrator of this tragedy had preyed upon their fear of curses, demanding sums ranging from $250,000 to $280,000. When the family could no longer meet these impossible demands, the ultimate, horrific price was exacted. The investigation revealed that the key to their home had been provided by those within their own circle, transforming their sanctuary into a trap. The subsequent trial and the conviction of Daphne Wright brought a measure of legal closure, with the jury delivering a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yet, the emotional weight of this case lingers. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of community vigilance and the necessity of protecting the vulnerable, especially those who, in their desire to respect tradition and find peace, may be susceptible to those who would twist that faith for greed. For the family left behind and the officers who pursued the truth, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee remains as a testament to lives that were defined by hard work, love for their children, and a resilience that persisted even in the face of insurmountable darkness. Justice was served, but the loss is one that continues to be felt by all who knew the goodness of the couple whose American dream was so tragically cut short. This reporting covers the essential details of the investigation and the tragic loss of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. Please let me know if you would like me to focus the narrative more heavily on a specific aspect, such as the legal proceedings or the community impact, for a follow-up piece. The city of Arlington, situated in the heart of Tarrant County, has long been a mosaic of diverse cultures and aspirations, serving as a sanctuary for immigrants who seek to build a legacy within the American landscape. Among those who contributed to the vibrancy of his community were Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, a couple who carried with them the time-honored traditions of their Vietnamese homeland. After arriving in the United States in the year 2000, they established themselves as hard-working members of society, dedicating their lives to their family and their commercial sewing business. They were pillars of their community, respected for their generosity and their unwavering commitment to their 3 children and grandchildren. However, the path of the immigrant is often marked by quiet struggles, and when the family business faced declining fortunes near the year 2011, the couple found themselves navigating the vulnerabilities that can arise when the pursuit of the American dream is met with unforeseen hardships. In their search for stability, they turned to a practice rooted in deep cultural belief, seeking guidance from a spiritual advisor who promised to alleviate the burdens of misfortune and curses. It was a search for healing that led them into a web of exploitation. Investigations later revealed that they had engaged the services of a Houston-based woman named Daphne Wright, who presented herself as a spiritual healer, but operated with a far more predatory intent. As the family poured their financial resources into these rituals, they fell into an overwhelming debt, eventually owing an amount between $250,000 and $280,000. This financial spiral created a desperate situation that would ultimately lead to a tragedy that shook the foundations of the Arlington community. On the morning of June 10, 2012, the discovery of the couple's death in their own home marked the beginning of a prolonged and complex investigation. Initially, the crime scene appeared to be a burglary that had escalated into violence, with evidence staged to implicate local gang activity. Detectives were presented with signs of struggle and items left behind to suggest a robbery gone wrong. Yet, the brutality of the act and the specific nature of the violence raised doubts among seasoned homicide investigators, who sensed that the scene had been carefully orchestrated to mislead them. For 3 years, the case remained cold, with no leads emerging from the forensic evidence collected at the residence. It was only through an unrelated arrest of a young man named Willie Guillory, whose DNA was subsequently entered into the national database following a felony conviction, that the truth began to surface. The subsequent investigation peeled back the layers of a calculated murder-for-hire plot. Willie Guillory, who was 16 years old at the time of the offense, confessed that he and his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had been recruited by Daphne Wright to execute the crime. The narrative that emerged was chilling. Daphne Wright, driven by greed and the desire to collect on the couple's life insurance policies, had orchestrated the attack, providing the keys to the apartment and demanding the couple be silenced when they could no longer meet their mounting debts. The role of the son-in-law, Chow Tran, also became a point of intense scrutiny throughout the legal proceedings, as he had provided access to the home and cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. His testimony proved pivotal in the trial of Daphne Wright, portraying her as a master manipulator who exploited the couple's spiritual beliefs for financial gain. In September of 2019, the jury reached a verdict, convicting Daphne Wright of capital murder and sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While this brought a measure of legal closure, the case remains a sobering reflection on the intersection of cultural vulnerability, the misuse of spiritual trust, and the devastating cost of human greed. For the family of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, the loss is an enduring wound, one that highlights the need for a community that looks out for its most vulnerable members. The resilience of the immigrant spirit is a testament to the strength required to build a new life in a foreign land. Yet this tragedy serves as a solemn reminder of the importance of vigilance and the necessity of protecting the dignity of those who seek nothing more than a peaceful and prosperous existence within our shared society. In the vast, interconnected tapestry of Arlington, Texas, the pursuit of the American dream has long been a defining narrative for families arriving from distant shores. For Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, a resilient couple who journeyed from Vietnam in the year 2000, this dream was built upon the foundations of industry, family, and the quiet dignity of a life well lived. Their lives, however, were brought to a sudden and heartbreaking end in the month of June in the year 2012, leaving community in shock and a police force grappled with a crime that defied the usual boundaries of their experience. The story began with a welfare check that felt wrong from the very first moment, when family members, unable to reach the couple, stood anxiously outside their residence. The atmosphere was thick with a premonition of tragedy. Responding officers, accustomed to the routine nature of such calls, quickly realized that the scene before them was something entirely different. The apartment, once a place of warmth and family gatherings, had been transformed into a site of profound grief. What investigators initially interpreted as a robbery gone wrong would eventually reveal a much more complex and harrowing tale of manipulation, financial desperation, and an inner circle turned against itself. For 21 years, homicide investigators had walked through many scenes, but the murder of the elderly couple left seasoned professionals shaken. The initial evidence appeared carefully curated to suggest a violent intrusion by local gangs. A blue bandana, a beer bottle, and remnants of controlled substances were found in a manner that seemed almost too deliberate. For the police, the scene felt staged, while the investigators looked outward toward street violence. The true catalyst of the crime was brewing far beneath the surface of the couple's daily life, rooted in a crisis of faith and finance. Long and Hong were pillars of their family, managing a commercial sewing business that had once secured significant contracts with major corporations. Yet, by the year 2011, the tides of fortune had turned. Facing the potential of bankruptcy and the unraveling of their legacy, the couple sought solace in the traditions of their homeland. They turned to spiritualism, seeking a guide who promised to remove the curses they believed were responsible for their misfortunes. This search led them to Daphne Wright, an individual who presented herself as a spiritual advisor capable of turning their luck around. As the financial pressure mounted, the relationship between the couple and their advisor shifted from spiritual guidance to a devastating form of exploitation. The family poured hundreds of thousands of dollars, between $250,000 and $180,000, into these rituals in a desperate bid to save their business. It was a cycle of dependency that eventually led to a cold, calculated decision. When the money ceased to flow and the debt grew insurmountable, the advisor viewed the couple not as clients to be saved, but as assets to be liquidated. The investigation, initially stalled for years, found its breakthrough in the year 2015 through a seemingly unrelated event. DNA evidence, collected from the scene years prior but left unmatched in national databases, suddenly found a link when a young man named Willie Guillory was processed for a separate felony. This discovery pulled the thread that unraveled the entire conspiracy. Under interrogation, the young man admitted to his role, revealing that he had been coerced by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, at the behest of Daphne Wright. The revelations that followed were difficult for the community to process. It was not a random act of violence, but a planned execution orchestrated by someone they had trusted. The mastermind, Daphne Wright, had sought to collect on the life insurance policies that the couple had maintained for their family. Testimony would later reveal that the keys to the apartment had been provided from within the family circle, adding a layer of intimate betrayal to an already senseless act. The trial that concluded in the year 2019 brought a measure of justice, with the jury finding Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder and sentencing her to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Yet, for those who lived through the investigation, the resolution remains bittersweet. Questions linger about the role of other individuals involved and the moral culpability of those who, while not pulling the trigger, allowed the machinery of this tragedy to turn. Ultimately, the tragedy of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu serves as a somber reminder of the vulnerabilities that can exist within even the most close-knit communities. It highlights the importance of resilience and the danger of exploitation. While the legal process has concluded, The memory of a hard-working couple who sought only a better life for their children endures. Their story is a testament to the fact that justice, though sometimes delayed by years and complex webs of deceit, remains a vital necessity in maintaining the fabric of a society built on trust and human connection. The morning of June 10, 2012, began with a sense of unease that would soon deepen into a profound, haunting sorrow for the Vietnamese immigrant community of Arlington, Texas. It was 7:29 in the morning when the local emergency dispatchers received a call from 38-year-old Chow Tran. His voice, strained by concern, requested a welfare check for his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The family, unable to reach the couple and witnessing the unsettling sight of an open window at their residence, waited outside in a state of mounting dread. When the responding officers stepped into the apartment, they did not find a simple case of a family who had stepped out for a walk. They found an entire household in disarray, a silent testament to a violent upheaval. For the veteran officers who arrived at the scene, the experience was visceral. The living room bore signs of a struggle, with items scattered and furniture overturned. Yet the true horror lay hidden within a bedroom closet. There, Long and Hong were discovered, bound with duct tape, their lives extinguished in a manner that defied comprehension. The scene was marked by an intensity of cruelty that left even the most seasoned investigators stunned. The couple, who had arrived in the United States in the year 2000 to build a legacy for their children and grandchildren, had been the victims of a heinous act that initially appeared to be a burglary gone wrong, or perhaps the manifestation of gang-related violence. The investigation, however, would soon move beyond the surface-level appearances of a robbery. Investigators were troubled by the precise, almost theatrical nature of the crime scene: a blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle, a plate of crushed pills, and other signs that felt curated to lead police toward a specific conclusion. For nearly 3 years, the case remained cold, a mystery that cast a shadow over the community and left the family in a state of suspended grief. The breakthrough arrived in the year 2015, not through a conventional lead, but through the fortuitous convergence of law enforcement efforts. A 16-year-old named Willie Guillory, whose DNA had been collected following an arrest for horse theft, became the link that connected the past to the present. Under questioning, Willie Guillory revealed a chilling narrative. He confessed to being present during the murders, claiming he had been coerced by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, under the direction of a woman named Daphne Wright. This revelation stripped away the veneer of a random criminal act, exposing a calculated murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by someone the family had trusted to improve their fortunes. Daphne Wright, a self-styled spiritual advisor, had preyed upon the family's traditional beliefs. As their commercial sewing business faltered and their American dream began to fracture, the couple, driven by a deep-seated cultural reliance on spiritual guidance to navigate life-altering crises, had sought her help to lift perceived curses and restore their prosperity. The relationship between the family and Daphne Wright had devolved into a parasitic cycle of debt and manipulation. As the family poured their resources into her rituals, their financial burdens grew, eventually reaching an estimated sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. When the money ceased to flow, Wright viewed the couple not as human beings in distress, but as assets to be liquidated. The plan, as it emerged through the testimonies of the perpetrators, was to collect on life insurance policies that the family held, turning a supposed spiritual alliance into a deadly betrayal. The courtroom proceedings that followed painted a grim portrait of greed and manipulation. While Daphne Wright was eventually convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, the resolution of the case remained incomplete for